Here we are, WrestleMania. Zombie AJ Styles and Paul and Daniel Bryan going at it for the belt. Go with a big boot from Bryan. Going for the yes kicks. Oh no, Roman Reigns with the spear. But looks like somebody's not happy that Roman's interfering with the match. Let it go. Let it go. Don't turn around and slam the door. Elsa has shocked the world. I'm really going crazy here, guys. Well, let's do one last video before spring break. Now, this one's going to be a little bit shorter because, honestly, this is I say that, but I have a tendency to go on and on and on in these videos. I want to talk a little bit about drug abuse in Long Day's Journey into Night, because believe it or not, the actual stuff that's going on with the mother's morphine addiction, there's a lot more going on there than you might initially think that will actually connect it to the yellow wallpaper. You know, I just realized I have totally blanked on who wrote the yellow wallpaper. Let me look that up real quick. Who wrote yellow wallpaper? Now, that in and of itself easily be a question for the final exam. Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Gosh, what kind of an English instructor am I that I actually remember, that I forget the writer of such an excellent piece? Now, one of my favorite things about literature is when you have to look deeper. You have to look in between the lines to kind of elicit the hidden story. That's partly the reason why I think I like New Historicism so much. But when we look at the mother and her addiction, there's a very nefarious circle that is fueling so much of the dysfunction in this play. And that circle is this. First, there was the death of the child Eugene. If you don't look carefully in the play, if you don't listen carefully, you'll completely miss that there was another brother that died as a baby. Jamie blames himself for the death of that child because he had some form of sickness. Now, we don't know exactly what that sickness was, but his mother told him, stay out of the baby's room because you're sick and the baby could get it. He did not. He went in there, even though he was not supposed to. The baby got sick and died. That could very much be the root of Jamie's self-hatred and alcoholism. Now, whether that's true or not, we kind of just sort of left to speculate. Now, the mother was devastated by this. You know, rightfully so. I mean, the complicated emotions that go with Jamie's actions as a child, probably not understanding what he was doing, maybe a little bit jealous of the baby, but it goes further than that. Everybody believed that, and now the name comes to me, I think it was Mary, the mother. They thought having another child would fix her. If anyone ever suggests that having a child will fix a problem for you, don't believe them. That's not how it works. Children don't fix things. Children make things so much worse. So when you go into having a child, now I'm not saying children are bad. I love my children, right? I say that like, I love my children. But no, I love my children, but you can't go into the action of having a child thinking that it's going to solve some type of problem for you. That is not how that works. Having a child is taking on a lot more responsibility and opening yourself up to mental damage. It's one of the greatest things you can ever do, but it can very easily destroy you as well. And that's what actually ends up happening to the mother in this play. She has Edmund. Now, also, let's stop for a minute and think about this point. The child who died, his name was Eugene. Eugene O'Neill put his own namesake on the child that died. He did not do that by accident. This play, he actually spoke about the autobiographical nature of this play. He got consumption. His parents, their profile fits exactly with the Tyrones. This is pretty much coming from an actual experience of his. And the interesting thing is that by all means, by all accounts, Eugene O'Neill should not have survived his fight with consumption, but he did. And he wrote this play about it. It really gives it that layer of authenticity and power, because we know this isn't him just pulling stuff out of the air. This is stuff that actually happened to him, so that he even puts his name on the child that died in the crib. Right now, Mary has Edmund, and it was a difficult birth. And difficult births, they're traumatizing as hell. To the point that a difficult birth can cause actual real psychological problems. You can end up with the equivalent of PTSD, and birth itself is traumatic enough to leave women with an imbalance of hormones afterward too, that basically predisposes them to depression. It's called postpartum depression. So Mary was in a lot of pain, and births, having been in a room during birth 3 times, that crap's serious, yo. So back then, doctors had a very cavalier attitude towards painkillers. Some doctors still maintain that attitude today, and they go to prison if there's any justice. You can't just give people painkillers, because you have to be very careful. You have to watch how people use them. The doctor that Tyrone, the father Tyrone, used in order to treat Mary in her pain simply threw morphine at her. And this was an extremely common occurrence at this time, because all they wanted to do was medicate away the pain. Now, combine the psychological issues that Mary was enduring with prolonged exposure to an opioid. That is a recipe for disaster. Now, you also keep in mind that with Mary's place in history at this point, they knew little to nothing about drug abuse. They knew nothing about addiction. And so the characters in this play simply have no context on how to deal with her addiction. You'll constantly hear the refrain from the members of the family, "Be strong, Mary. You can still fight it." And they're lying to themselves. Oh, she's just up in the spare room because dad was snoring and she can't sleep. They're lying to themselves, but it also is kind of understandable because they see drug abuse at this point as a mental failing, as a moral failing. If Mary would just be stronger, if she could just have the willpower to overcome this, then she could, but she doesn't, and it makes them mad. Jamie calls her a dope fiend. Everyone calls her a dope fiend, which is the equivalent of calling someone a junkie today. Now, what I'm saying right now is going to be kind of controversial too, because this kind of brings in a little social justice warriorism. You'll notice I'm doing that a little bit more and more. As you guys listen to these lectures, if you disagree with this attitude towards the play, by all means, write about it. But I don't believe Mary's a bad person. I think she's addicted to morphine. If you know anything about morphine, it's bad. It's horrendous. I'm not sure anyone can fight a morphine addiction on their own. I don't think it has anything to do with willpower. It has to do with, that needs therapy. That needs actual drugs to help you wean yourself off of it. You're always going to have that predisposition. And if somebody relapses into an addiction to freaking morphine, it's not like, oh, you're such a weak person. It's freaking morphine. It's like the absolute worst case scenario for drugs, except for maybe like heroin, which is pretty much like the same chemical thing is morphine. Morphine might be more addictive. Like she's up against something that they just completely don't understand. And it's tragic because there's such a historical layer to this because they have no way that they can understand this. At this point, their perception of Mary as it being a moral failure it's tragic as hell. And the title Long Day's Journey into Night really only applies to Mary herself. The play's gradual progression of her from the morning into the evening is so horrifyingly realistic because she begins relatively normal, but off, right? Everybody notices because she's recently relapsed. She's recently relapsed. She probably used morphine to get to sleep, right? At now in the morning, her cravings are coming back. Her mood is being affected, and she's using throughout the day. And she starts actually utilizing the addiction to hurt her family when she's like, that's all right. You go ahead and do what you want then. I'm going to the drugstore to pick up some hand cream and some Band-Aids and some Pepperidge Farm Milano cookies. We know what you're doing, Mary. But again, all of this stuff, like it's really easy to demonize Mary. And I was wondering with the discussion post if anybody would demonize Mary because she acts really awful throughout the play. I think for most modern audiences, they're going to see Mary as someone more to sympathize with because morphine was not something she went to on her own. It was prescribed by a doctor and someone's giving it to her. Who is giving it to her? How is she able to go to the druggist, go to the drugstore, and get these powerful drugs? It's Tyrone's penny pinching that has caused this problem. The doctor that they use, he's a quack. He's not good. He'll write the prescription because he doesn't care, right? And I don't think there were any real legal repercussions at this time. So he could do that and get away with it for absolutely no threat to him. We even get a really good, interesting look into this when they send the family's, not servant. She wasn't a servant. She was like a house attendant. She sends her in to get the drugs. And the pharmacist gives her heat about it. He's like, where the hell did you get this? How did you get this? Someone of your stature that you should have this type of, and then she's like, oh, well, sir, Miss Mary Tyrone done went and gave me the prescription. I'll march you right out to the car. And of course, what's the druggist say? Oh, okay. He knows what's going on. And I don't know the attitude between the lower class working woman needing the morphine and Mary Tyrone. A little bit of classism going on there, right? He'll give it to Mary Tyrone because he knows her. He knows her situation. And he's like, oh, yeah, she's addicted to the stuff. She can pay for it, right? Even though Tyrone wants everybody to think that they're, in the poorhouse, which their finances are actually kind of hard to lock down. Now, so this is not entirely Mary's fault, what's happened to her. She's chained first to Jamie, although it's hard to blame him either because he did something potentially terrible as a child, not knowing what he was doing. But it's also Tyrone's penny pinching. This is the circle of abuse and the circle of psychological affliction. Here's where the reason I followed this off of Yellow Wallpaper. The medical treatment is what's destroyed Mary. The same way that our protagonist in Yellow Wallpaper has been driven completely bat doo-doo crazy, thinking, oh my gosh, someone's crawling around in the wallpaper. Mary's drug addiction is basically a byproduct of a still immature drug distribution system, a still messed up medical system. The circle of abuse revolves and revolves and revolves. Probably the darkest line in the play comes from this. When Edmund is talking to his father, which Edmund reminds me so much of myself, and that's not a compliment to myself. That's actually very, very, I wouldn't want to be Edmund. Edmund might be the most sympathetic, but he's not a good person either. But Edmund and Tyrone are talking, and they start arguing about Tyrone's penny pinching because Edmund realizes that that's part of what messed up their mother, and he tries to blame everything on the mother and on the father. This is all your fault, Dad. You're the one who did this. If you hadn't bought that damn awful doctor, if you hadn't paid him to treat her, she would not be like this. And what does the father turn around and say? Quite possibly one of the worst things you can ever say to another human being. He turns it around on Edmund and says, and she would not have been this way had you never been born. I'm sorry, Edmund. I did not mean that. Yeah, but you said it. You said it. He was hurt, and he tried to hurt him back, and it worked. You can tell, especially depending on how this is acted out, Edmund's knees are broken when he hears that. The pain is used as a weapon. The pain is used to double back and gain control of one's psychological situation. It's terrible. It's terrible, and it's also weirdly beautiful in its awfulness. This family's doomed. Every time I read this play, I go back and I think, do they really love each other? I doubt it more and more and more every time I read it, but I do still feel like they do. Because all the horrible things they do just becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. There's a lot of interesting, weird stuff hiding in this play. And the more you read it over and over and over again, you always notice something new. It's a new hurt. It's a new pain. It's a new sore spot that someone's decided to put salt on their thumb and just... It's an amazing play. It's a messed up play. I haven't decided what our discussion question will be. Maybe I'll just hold off on that for now. You guys have assignments to work on. And it's almost spring break. I don't know about you guys, but I need a drink with an umbrella in it. I'm getting sick of this house. I'm starting to talk to my kids' toys, right? Do you think he'll ever win the belt, Elsa? Probably. I am a ruthless warrior of the ring. You guys have a day.